In April 1965, 4 years after the assassination of Rafael Leónidas Trujillo, the streets of Santo Domingo once again became the epicenter of U.S. intervention. Under the relentless Caribbean heat, young people, students, and workers built improvised barricades. They stood their ground against tanks and aircraft roaring across Dominican skies. Under the name Operation Power Pack, 42,000 U.S. Marines landed on the island to restore order. In reality, they crushed the democratic aspirations of the Dominican people. That invasion would leave a permanent mark on a nation that once again saw its destiny decided by others.
Nosotros vimos en el barrio, empezaron a llegar los primeros militares constitucionalistas, casi en hora de la madrugada, porque esa noche nadie durmió en el barrio. Por eso, cuando en la tarde del 25 empezaron los bombardeos de los aviones al palacio, en esa área de nosotros era que los aviones empezaban a bajar en picada.
On May 30th, 1961, a burst of gunfire on a highway in San Cristobal ended the life of Rafael Leónidas Trujillo. The dictator had ruled with an iron fist for more than 30 years, weaving a system of absolute control over politics, the economy, and everyday life in the Dominican Republic. His death created a power vacuum. Many breathed a sigh of relief, dreaming of a democratic future. But the old mechanisms of authoritarianism quickly began to reassert themselves. The United States, which for decades had tolerated and supported El Jefe because of his fierce anti-communism, watched the transition with caution. Washington was determined to prevent the country from following the path of Cuba, where the 1959 revolution had challenged U.S. dominance in the Caribbean. In this climate of uncertainty, Juan Bosch emerged. An intellectual and politician from the Dominican Revolutionary Party, Bosch promised democracy and social reform. In December 1962, Dominicans went to the polls for the first time in more than 3 decades. Bosch won by a wide margin and took office on February 27, 1963. His government promoted a new constitution that guaranteed civil liberties, limited military power, and proposed agrarian reforms to benefit peasants and workers. It was a breath of fresh air after decades of repression. But the backlash came swiftly.
La agudización de las contradicciones y las ambiciones de poder movieron a sectores de las Fuerzas Armadas a dar un golpe de Estado el 25 de septiembre de 1963, que derrocó el gobierno legítimamente constituido del profesor Juan Bosch. El gobierno de Bosch, quien había gobernado democráticamente por 7 meses, fue sustituido por un régimen de facto, el triunvirato.
Conservative sectors, business elites, landowners, the church hierarchy, and the military saw Bosch as a threat to their privileges. To them, his reforms were pro-communist, a label that, in the middle of the Cold War, amounted to a political death sentence. The United States, though officially supportive, distrusted Bosch's political independence. That context led to his overthrow within months. A group of military officers seized power with Washington's approval, establishing a civil-military government known as the Triumvirate, led by weak civilian figures but firmly controlled by the armed forces. The new regime lacked legitimacy and quickly faced popular rejection. Between 1963 and 1965, the country spiraled into protests, strikes, and conspiracies. The promise of democracy faded. In its place, the shadow of repression returned. The people demanded the return of Bosch and the 1963 Constitution, while the military tightened its grip. The crisis was brewing in the streets, waiting to explode.
Las masas populares se lanzaban a las calles en apoyo al movimiento constitucionalista que clamaba retorno a la constitucionalidad y regreso de Bosch sin elecciones.
Cuando estalla la Revolución de Abril del 65, todo ese grupo de militares constitucionalistas, todo ese grupo de oficiales que había sido cancelado, fuimos los que encabezamos el movimiento.
On April the 24th, 1965, accumulated anger turned into open insurrection. A group of constitutionalist officers, led by Colonel Francisco Alberto Caamaño, rose up to restore Juan Bosch to power. Thousands of civilians joined them, students, workers, professionals, and women carrying ammunition through the barricades. The message was clear: defend the 1963 Constitution and reclaim stolen democracy. The streets of Santo Domingo filled with shouts, flags, and gunfire. At improvised barricades, young men armed with old rifles and sawed-off shotguns faced troops loyal to the triumvirate, commanded by General Elias Wessin, I. Wessin. The city, divided into zones of control, became a battlefield. Every corner, every building could turn into a trench. The revolution carried a mix of romance and desperation. Poor neighborhoods became centers of resistance, where heroism and tragedy intertwined. People fought with whatever they had as the first martyrs of the uprising fell. The passion was immense. So was the chaos. Soon, the conflict crossed Dominican borders. Images of young fighters waving flags while resisting tanks reached Washington.
Las contiendas en el puente Duarte y en la fortaleza Osama significaron reveses a favor de los constitucionalistas. Los golpistas del 63 y sus aliados entran en pánico y piden ayuda a Estados Unidos para hacer frente a la situación.
In the middle of the Cold War, any popular uprising was viewed with suspicion, especially one demanding social reforms. For President Lyndon B. Johnson, the memory of Cuba was still fresh. He would not allow another hostile government to emerge in the Caribbean. While the population fought for democracy in the streets, a very different narrative was being crafted inside the White House.
And as a revolution by followers of exiled Dominican President Juan Bosch quickly deteriorated into outright anarchy when the leadership was taken over by communist agents. They exhorted civilians to take to the streets, replaced their wooden clubs with rifles, and instituted a reign of terror.
The constitutionalist uprising was portrayed as a communist threat, an infiltration endangering hemispheric security. That narrative became the pretext for military intervention. The April Revolution ignited hope among Dominicans, but within days, that flame would face the most powerful military machine on the continent. What began as a struggle for democracy was about to become an unequal war, with an outcome imposed from the outside.
The American nation cannot, must not, and will not permit the establishment of another communist government in the Western Hemisphere.
On April 28, 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson gave the order. Under the justification of protecting American lives and preventing communist infiltration, Operation Power Pack began. Within hours, U.S. ships and aircraft unloaded thousands of Marines onto Dominican soil. By the end of the operation, more than 42,000 troops were deployed in Santo Domingo, an overwhelming force for an island of barely 8 million people. The image was unmistakable. M48 tanks rolled through Caribbean avenues, helicopters hovered over poor neighborhoods. Snipers took positions on rooftops. U.S. soldiers enforced an occupation order. Facing them, the constitutionalists had little more than old rifles, pistols, and the courage of a determined people. The imbalance was obscene and perfect Cold War propaganda for the United States.
Within a week, the initial force of Marines was bolstered to 14,000 men, including units of the 82nd Airborne. The troops threw a cordon around downtown Santo Domingo, where most of the rebels held out, and pushed them towards the sea. This was the first taste of war for these men, but they acted like veterans. Efficiently trained, they flushed out snipers, but not without cost. Before the week was out, 5 American soldiers were dead.
Within days, the capital was split in two. The constitutionalist zone, centered in Ciudad Nueva, held out behind improvised barricades. On the other side, foreign troops and forces loyal to General Elias Wessin, E. Wessin, consolidated their positions under Washington's military umbrella. The Ozama River became the dividing line, like a border in an unequal war. The fighting was brutal. Bullets did not distinguish between fighters and civilians. Entire families were trapped in the crossfire. Witnesses recall streets soaked in blood, while U.S. loudspeakers announced that the mission was to restore peace. One of the most violent episodes involved the Armed Forces Training Center, known as CEFA, whose role was especially brutal during a phase of combat known as Operation Cleanup.
En la operación limpieza, a lo que ellos más le hicieron daño fue a la población civil inocente, porque el jefe entraba, aún siguiera acabando con todo lo que encontraba.
Even so, the constitutionalists under Colonel Caamaño's command resisted with discipline and heroism. They knew they were facing a superpower that would never allow their victory. As if that were not enough, the U.S. operation was soon joined by an inter-American force under the banner of the Organization of American States, commonly known as the OAS troops from Brazil, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Paraguay took part. In theory, it was a multinational mission. In practice, it provided diplomatic cover for Washington's intervention. What Santo Domingo saw as an invasion was presented internationally as a peacekeeping operation.
49 U.S. servicemen were wounded during the action. The OAS announced that an inter-American force would be formed to maintain the peace until a new government is able to take over. When the inter-American troops arrive, units from the United States will be withdrawn.
The psychological impact was devastating. For many Dominicans, seeing foreign soldiers patrol their capital revived the bitter memory of the first U.S. occupation in 1916. History seemed to repeat itself, with sovereignty once again subordinated to outside interests. From the very beginning, the balance was tilted. The constitutionalist resistance, though brave, could not withstand the military power deployed by the United States. International pressure, combined with OAS mediation, led to an agreement, the creation of a provisional government led by Hector Garcia Godoy. Colonel Caamaño, now a symbol of resistance, accepted a ceasefire to prevent further bloodshed, though the echoes of combat still lingered in the streets.
Death still stalks the streets of Santo Domingo, although the people appear calm in the wake of the revolt that claimed 2,000 lives. As the Marines clear the last rebels from the international zone, 2 more Americans are reported dead. This brings to 10 the number of U.S. service dead on the day of the truce signing.
Peace finally seemed to arrive. But peace did not mean justice. In 1966, under international supervision and with U.S. troops still present, elections were held. The winner was Joaquin Balaguer, a former collaborator of Trujillo who promised stability and the continuation of a system aligned with Washington's interests. Bosch's democratic promise was buried. The Dominican people, who had taken up arms to defend the 1963 Constitution, saw their struggle silenced and their sovereignty constrained by foreign powers. For many, the defeat did not occur on the battlefield. It occurred at the negotiating table, where a popular revolution was reduced to a diplomatic file. The outcome of 1965 left deep wounds, thousands dead and wounded, a devastated capital, entire generations marked by the memory of an intervention that crushed the will for change. Above all, it confirmed a bitter truth. The Dominican Republic had lived through its second major U.S. occupation after the one that lasted from 1916 to 1924, a clear message that Washington would never allow another Cuba in the Caribbean. With Balaguer in power, political repression and military control became entrenched for years. U.S. soldiers could return home, their mission complete.
Brigadier General Robert Linville, Commanding General, U.S. Forces, Dominican Republic, congratulates his men on the success of their mission. Farewells are said all around as the planes are boarded, and with equipment and luggage loaded, it's goodbye Dominican Republic, hello home.
Surviving constitutionalists were persecuted, many forced into exile, others into silence. What once felt like a cry for freedom became a painful memory, passed down through generations as both a warning and a symbol. The April Revolution did not die on the battlefield. It died with the imposition of an order that protected foreign interests over national aspirations. This was more than a lost battle. It became the symbol of a people who sought to reclaim their sovereignty and were crushed by the gears of the Cold War. The United States justified its actions in the name of order. For Dominicans, it was yet another occupation that shattered their dreams of democracy. History remembers those weeks as the forgotten War of the Caribbean, an echo of resistance silenced by foreign cannons. Today, every memory of 1965 stands as a reminder of what it means to fight for freedom in the shadow of giants.